Hi there. Welcome to FinFactor. I'm your host, Blaine Bertsch, co-founder and CEO at Dry Run Cash Flow Forecasting Software. And joining me today is Sam Gupta, the principal consultant of Elevate IQ, a Toronto, Canada-based ERP and digital transformation consulting firm. Thanks for joining me, Sam.
Thank you so much for having me, Blaine. I love your show. I love your work.
Oh, thanks so much. I really appreciate that. And before the show, we were just sort of talking about, like, you guys I know are ERP experts, and we started to dive into this area of almost like first time CFOs as they dive into their first time ERP implementation. And you just mentioned, a lot of times they don't really understand what they're in for and how they need to prepare. And honestly, it's like, well, we better start recording because this is going to get interesting. So that's what I wanted to dive into. You're implementing your first or maybe sometimes your second ERP. What are they in for? Let's start at the beginning here. What are they in for?
Yeah, so it's always a very interesting topic because everybody is going to have sort of different maturity in terms of where they are going to be in their journey of ERP. And in general, from our perspective, we always recommend that this is probably going to be a journey. It's not going to be something like, okay, you sign the contract today, you buy something, and then you are off to the races. It doesn't work that way. It's going to be a journey, right? Now, coming to your point in terms of, where people sort of struggle with respect to ERP. So number one thing is always going to be that they have this mindset that they are buying a piece of software, which is great, but piece of software requires a lot more around that. Okay. The second problem that most people struggle with is going to be, okay, you are CFO, great, but ERP is a lot more than that. It's not going to be just the finance and accounting. Even if you can figure out finance and accounting, there are going to be other pieces that you need to make sure that people are going to be comfortable with. And if they are not,
Mhm.
and if they are not willing to make that change, and obviously change management is a big topic around ERP, then most likely they are not going to use the system. They are going to hijack the system. You are not going to get the right data inputs, and because of that, you are going to have a lot of problems in your financials.
Yeah.
So it's
Yeah.
probably not going to work. So these are some of the cases. So I'm pretty sure you are going to have a lot of follow-up questions there.
Yeah, and from my understanding of, and I've never been part of a full implementation on the client side, but from my understanding of just seeing what's involved, like you said, there's always a lot of people involved,
Yeah.
and all of those people have a critical point in making sure that the data is up to date and it's accurate and it actually makes sense. And you have to get buy-in from a team, and then you have to build this custom system that it's like a spider web. It's like you said, it's like people consider sometimes like, well, I'm just buying software like I bought, like I connect to Zoom, right?
Yeah.
No, it's like buying probably feels like 100 pieces of software that are all connected with a little line and 100 people involved. Where like what's step one? And so I'm talking like, let's say a CFO is going, okay, because we talk with, in fact, I've probably had 4 conversations this week. CFO comes in and they're like, yeah, we are on like 5 locations and 3 are on this software.
Yeah.
And it's like literally on a computer. And then we got one over here that's on another cloud based one. And then one over here, they're actually still using spreadsheets or some ridiculous thing. And they go like, I know we got to do something. And we're just hearing this. Like, we don't even, we don't sell that. We're trying to solve a different problem for them. Um, so they haven't there it's like if they're at ground zero, so they don't even know, like they know they may need an ERP, but they don't know which one, they don't know
Yeah.
where to go, they don't know where to
Yeah.
turn to. What is the very first point where they should start so that they start at the beginning, not 3 steps down the road?
Yeah, so that's a very interesting question. And this is what we recommend, that you should definitely be reflecting a lot in terms of the question being, why do you need an ERP? The question cannot be that, okay, I have some sort of legacy system and I am simply trying to replace that, or I have 5 locations, they are running on a legacy software. Those should not be the drivers. Okay, if
Mhm.
you are looking for an ERP is supposed to be more of the financial consolidation strategy. It's a strategy play. Now, do you
Mhm.
want to run as a consolidated company? Is the question. Now, I'm
Yeah.
not talking about the real FP&A consolidation. the space that you are in. Obviously you can consolidate after the fact, but
Mhm.
transactionally speaking, operationally speaking, okay, if you want to work as one team in the financially controlled manner, and you want to have the end-to-end traceability of those transactions, now this is not going to matter for every single industry out there. Every industry is different. In some cases, financial consolidation strategy is probably not going to make sense. You can consolidate
Mhm.
after the fact, you can get your financials, you are probably going to be okay. But in other cases where your cost control is going to be critical at each point, that's where you should be asking yourself, okay, do you need an ERP? And if you need an ERP, what is that driver that you need to find yourself? And then your goal should not be just to look at this as more of the binary decision, ERP versus no ERP. The way this works is you have to create your operational fabric, and the way to create your operational fabric is going to be the combination of systems. Okay, so it's never going to be one system that is going to be always enough for you, even though a lot of ERP vendors are going to argue that okay, ERP means you are set and done. It doesn't work that way. Okay, so you need
Mhm.
to have different categories of system. They are designed for very specific purposes. You have ERP from the finance perspective. Obviously you have FP&A, CPM. That's a very different category. Okay, it's ERP
Yep.
is not supposed to do all of that. Okay, now, from the operations perspective, you have supply chain systems, you have marketing focus systems, sales focus systems. So it doesn't matter what is going to be the role of ERP in your architecture. In some cases, it's going to be lower scope depending upon what you are trying to accomplish. But you have to figure out those boxes the way you are
Mhm.
going to design your organizational structure. Okay, in the case of organizational structure, you have to define, okay, this is my HR, this is my sales, this is my marketing, this is my finance, this is my operations, and this is how they are going to work together. This is how their handshake is going to be. Likewise, you have to do this with the systems as well, but you have to layer in your departmental boundaries as well. Now this whole
Yep.
process, Blaine, is described as more of the phase zero planning. Okay, if you don't do that, and if you're simply going to buy a software, you are going to find a lot of surprises. That is guaranteed.
Yeah.
So I don't know if I'm
Yeah.
answering your question, but that is probably the first step in answering or asking that question, I guess.
Well, that's kind of interesting because I this week, like, because I was sort of, these are really fresh in my mind, and I know there was you basically described a couple different conversations I had, and one of them was they had numerous entities, and one of the challenges they had was it's like, yeah, none of our chart of accounts match, none of it, like, so we can't compare apples to apples to apples, even though
Yeah,
the locations are doing the same thing. And so it was kind of like first step was we got to figure out how to get the systems matching. So when we consolidate, you can see apples to apples, and when you can consolidate, it's grouped properly. And then I think of another organization I talked with this week, and they had several entities. The ones I remember though is one was retail, and one was a large project based business
yeah,
with, like, these are polar opposite. In this organization, it made perfect sense that they have such diverse entities. It makes
yeah,
perfect sense. But it's like, yeah, that does not even probably make sense for these different entities to even maybe be on the same ERP. At the end, they may want to consolidate from like a financial forecast perspective, but completely different problem. And I can see that, like, yeah, if they don't sort of recognize that, they
yeah.
could try build it. Like, one could be like, let's do the same ERP everywhere. It's like, that's actually going to be worse for you. And then the other one, it's like it almost is like, yeah, this solves so much of our problems, right?
Yeah, could not agree more. And honestly speaking, let's say if your goal is to simplify or just streamline different chart of accounts or GLs, and the overarching goal here, let's say in this particular case, is going to be just the financial reporting, to be completely honest. Okay. And if your goal is just to do financial reporting, then you don't have to streamline this from the ERP perspective. Because when you do that, you are going to have impact on your operational transactions. And when you have impact
Mhm.
on your operational transactions, you are going to have impact on different departments, customers, interactions, etc., and that could be a very heavy lift in general. So again,
Mhm.
the only thing you are doing is you are simplifying your chart of accounts. You are sort of streamlining the reporting structure. You can probably do that inside FP&A. Okay, Where
Mhm.
ERP really makes sense, if you really want to do ERP, and again, that's more of the financial consolidation strategy, is going to be when you need to improve the speed of your transactions. And these are going to be your sales transactions that you are trying to
Mhm.
process. You need to improve your fulfillment process. You need to have complete financial control on your each of the subledgers that you are going to have. So this is very micro perspective. It's not a macro perspective. Macro is going to
Yeah.
be just the financial planning reporting, after the fact analysis, and sometimes you need to
Mhm.
really ask yourself, why do you need an ERP? Because anytime you are going to have ERP centric processes, that is going to be much heavier lift on the organization. ERP has a play. ERP has very important play, but if we don't ask the right questions, if we don't implement it in the right spirit, then you are going to have a lot of challenges in the organization. People are not simply not going to adapt. They are going to say, if it is financial reporting, why should I change? Please tell me.
Yeah. Now, I want to jump right on top of that because you said right away people in your organization, and when you have a multi entity, oftentimes what we see is those entities aren't spun up by the parent company; they're actually acquired, and
Yeah.
so that's why the systems are completely different, the culture is completely different, the management team. So one of those big challenges is if you were looking and going, okay, I really think I need this for all of our entities, or maybe a large portion of our entities. It makes perfect sense. How early and how early do you get people at right at the very base level involved in that sort of discussion and understanding and planning process?
Yeah, so honestly speaking, it should not be done, I would say, at the department level. It has to be done at the corporate strategy level. Okay, what are your pain points, the major pain points? And major pain
Mhm.
points has to be more in terms of the KPIs that you are trying to hit. In general, the reason why ERP would make sense is because you have some of the admin cost that you have because of too many data silos. The only thing you are
Mhm.
doing, you have hired a lot of people, and the only thing that they do day in day out is they are going to pick a sales order from here, they are going to put it there. Great job, but it doesn't add any value to the business. So
Yeah.
those are the questions that you should be asking. Okay, what is my revenue line? What is my cost line? Is your revenue and cost line consistent, and what can I do from the cost perspective as well as from the customer experience perspective? Because each of the
Mhm.
transactions that you are going to process, they are going to have impact on whether you are going to win the deal or you are not going to win the deal. Okay, because time is
Mhm.
everything in this world, right? So again, the ERP makes sense when you are trying to reduce those friction points, you are trying to expedite the processes, you are trying to reduce the labor spent, you are trying to introduce some sort of financial control. So again, if you go to a department and you tell them that, hey, from tomorrow onwards we are going to be on this fancy ERP, it's not going to go anywhere to be completely honest. Okay, so
Yeah.
this has to be done at the CEO level, board level. They have to figure out, okay, what am I trying to do in the next 5 years? What do I want to be when I grow up? Okay, I'm at $20 million right
Mhm.
now, I'm trying to get to 50. Okay, am I ever going to get there?
Yeah.
So that's where should be the driver in my mind. And if you do that
Yeah.
way, then the conversation becomes easier. Look, buddy, this is how we are trying to do you have some other plans here?
Yeah, so there's still like you have to have some sort of resolution and guiding principle and everything. And at what point do you start going, okay, now let's start talking at maybe management of the location. And then at what level or at what point do they start going, okay, now I actually have to talk with my staff because we actually have to know how they do things and will the system actually work right on the ground floor level? Because I can imagine if you did everything and then like you said did the grand unveiling and went you're doing this today, that's not probably going to work. But it's also like you're not going to a person doing like moving transactions around on a daily basis and saying,
Yeah.
hey, what ERP would you buy? So like I know there's this process in place. How do you sort of envision when you start engaging those different levels, when is the appropriate time to get them involved for the most success?
Yeah, so that's where phase zero comes handy, right? So these things are really intertwined, to be completely honest. Okay, you have defined your top level strategy, you have your KPIs down, you have your financial statements down. This is what I'm trying to do in the future in next 5 years. Okay, but how do you translate that to your ground, right? So that's why
Mhm.
as part of phase zero, what you're going to have the whole business process re-engineering. Okay, as part of the business process re-engineering analysis, what you have to do is you have to define, number one, you have to identify each of the transactions. When you are going to speak to all of these people, departments, they all are going to have different stories. Okay, everybody has their own versions of how the company is running, to be completely honest. So there is never going to be a consistent
Yeah.
story. So how do you align that story? Okay, so
Mhm.
aligning of that needs to happen on a piece of paper so that everybody is clear in terms of what you are trying to do. Number one, your vision, obviously, whatever you are trying to translate. Okay, this is where the organization is going. This is what we all need to do. If we all don't do that, then we probably are going to run into challenges. Unless you have any other plans, I'm more than happy to hear those. But right now, I
Mhm.
mean, this plan is making sense because we have some documentation here in terms of how this is going to work. Then the next thing is going to be
Yeah.
align all of those parties and bring a process model as well as data model. And most people sort of don't necessarily understand how the process model as well as the data model are related. And when I say data, this is your enterprise information. Okay, this is your master data, the way your systems are going to be interacting with each other, the way your departments are going to be doing the handoff between
Mhm.
them. That's what is defined by information model. If these two things are not going to be aligned, there are going to be challenges in your enterprise architecture. So basically the process is going to be that you have to talk to all of these people, you have to define the as process maps, and finally it doesn't matter whether you have the real chart maps or some sort of documentation, but you have to have a version of story that is going to be aligned with everybody. It has to be agreed upon that, okay, this is how we feel as a team that we are operating, and this is going to be my to be. Now, are you guys willing to digest this? How are you guys going to
Yeah.
feel? And obviously, they are going to say whatever they are going to say, and you have to detect, whether they are really going to be comfortable when they are going to go through such massive change, right? So then you sort of design the whole to be model, the target operating model that you are trying to design, and based on that, then you have to figure out, okay, which systems are going to be right fit. It doesn't matter whether it is going to be ERP, CRM, FP&A, WMS, TMS, supply chain, whatever. Okay, these pillars are just the enablers of the vision that you are trying to create from the process
Yeah.
perspective as well as from the information model perspective. Now, this exercise takes a long time, and there are
Yeah.
still going to be blind spots because you don't know which systems you're going to have in the target state. So it becomes more of the chicken and egg problem.
Mhm.
So how do you sort of
Yeah.
align that? So these are some of the challenges that we run into in aligning. But I mean, there's probably the process.
And like the thing that sort of floats to top of mind here, like it that all makes sense, and being able to step back and kind of paint the picture of the vision is a way to kind of get people sort of on board. But I know that it's one of those things that in theory that all makes sense. But what have you seen works when um, there is that, like, hey, we sort of did the process we went through, and it's like a full stop here. We've got like some real pushback over here. When those things come up, what are some of the fallbacks that they have to be able to go, okay, we got to get, this is an issue over here. How do we get people on board before we can move forward?
Yeah, and that's going to be a very iterative process, and that's why it's not supposed to be, okay, we are going to build this fancy strategy document and I'm going to present this to you, and then you guys can figure out how to implement this, I guess.
Yeah.
Okay, so
Yeah.
you are going to get challenges at every single step because there is going to be a real impact on the organization when you define these things. Okay, and changes could be things such as, okay, we are going to change your SKU numbers. Now, if you are going to change your SKU numbers and those SKU numbers are printed on your products at this point of time, now you are trying to change pretty much everything. How are you going to serve
Yeah.
those SKUs in the future? Let's say if somebody comes back and they want support for that specific product. So these are some of the questions that you should be answering throughout the process. So there is no sort of start point and end point with these things. Okay, it has to be iterative. As you do more analysis, you are going to learn more in terms of what
Mhm.
all do you need to change, where is the friction point, why is there a friction point, do they have a legitimate reason, and if they have, then what is going to be my plan for that particular item. And once you figure out the plan, then you have to analyze the cost. Okay, look, buddy, you are not willing to concede here, I get it, you have a real problem. But I'm doing
Yeah.
the business case analysis. My original plan was maybe a million short. Now you are throwing me this curveball, and because of that, now I'm a million over. Hopefully somebody's gonna pay, and hopefully the CFO is gonna pay. or we are going to take from your budget. Are you okay with that?
Yeah.
Now we have a conversation. So
Yeah.
if you really translate that to the real dollars, then it becomes a very meaningful conversation. And that's where the real problem is. When you talk to strategy people, they are really, really good at defining the strategy, which makes no sense in the real world. And then you have the
Yeah.
real world, the people who have to really implement it. So there's a real gap between the business and technology teams, so
Mhm.
that gap has to be filled by this iterative process. And obviously it's longer, it's painful, it's expensive.
Yeah, and like one of the things business still has to keep moving forward while you're doing this, and so that's a lot onto like a CFO's shoulders, and
Yeah,
then all the way down through all of the management, all of the people, all the way down to the people that are actually using the system. Um, and like, man, I can tell even when I've talked to some CFOs, you can just see like it's not like they're like, we're gonna have to move to an ERP. It's like, we're gonna
exactly.
have to pull,
Yeah,
like they
yeah.
know, where they're kind of like, I'm not sure what I'm in for, but I know it's gonna be brutal. But there's, I think probably, I imagine one of the things that can help with that is just having the right pace and having the right time, and just like, hey, if we do this on a timeline that's reasonable, it won't be all encompassing for you and your team. We can make this work. So how do you approach that? How do you reassure them, and what would be sort of a typical timeline where, hey, we can do this and it's not going to be completely disruptive, and it'll flow out naturally?
Yeah, so honestly speaking, even for people who are doing this on a daily basis, okay, there are going to be a lot of surprises in the process, even with them, just because of the number of variables that you are dealing with. And generally, the companies, they sort of get in trouble because they sort of underestimate how much expertise is going to be required. So one of the questions that you asked is, okay, how do you balance your operations as well as this? Obviously, this is probably going to be a full-time job for you. Okay, just implementing an ERP system, can you believe this? Okay, the way this
Mhm.
works is, if you look at any of these standard quotes that you are getting from software vendors, OEMs, resellers, they are only going to cover the technical part in general. Okay, after that, companies need to prepare for at least 90% of the workload, I would say, in terms of the total amount of work. Change
Mhm.
management, data migration. Vendors are not going to do that unless somebody is overcommitting themselves, or they have a lot of time to donate for free. uh, you know they are not going to take that responsibility unless you ask them, you are paying them for. So you
Mhm.
need to find that capacity somehow. So how are you going to find that capacity? One possibility could be that you align your internal resources. Now these internal resources are not doing these things on a daily basis, so obviously they don't even know what questions to ask to begin with. So
Mhm.
they are going to have a lot of trial and error, so that whatever 90% of the effort that I was talking about, it probably becomes 900%. So not only you are not focused on
Yeah.
your job, okay, that you are not doing that good, and then there are going to be a lot of deceptions from the ERP perspective as well. And that's where you need to sort of balance this, right? You have to have the right internal capacity as well as the external capacity, so that you are not disrupting your core operations. If you hire additional people just for this, sometimes it could be hit or miss with that as well, because
Yeah.
if you don't have that expertise yourself, I don't know how you are going to hire those people, I guess. I mean, that's my, maybe you can answer
Yeah.
that. So in my case, I mean, we struggle to hire because sometimes it's very hard even for us. Okay, but now
Mhm.
you are not doing this on a daily basis, so how are you going to hire? So every mistake that you are going to make, whether it is going to be hiring mistake or the trial and error that you are doing as part of the process, that is probably going to fire back, and that is going to have some sort of implications on the cost. How do you balance this? Don't allocate more than, I would say, 20 to 25% capacity. The rest of that
Mhm.
should be some temporary capacity that you should be finding. It doesn't matter whether you are doing getting it from the software vendor or a consulting firm or whatever. They are going to be way better, I would say. The reason for that is just because they are doing it on a daily basis. Number two, you need to track at least 2,000 different vendors, their licensing, pricing, so many different things. I mean, there are so many blind
Mhm.
spots. You are never going to master these things, right? So I don't know.
Yeah.
The companies that are really successful, to be completely honest, if we analyze, they have balanced these two things: internal capacity, external capacity. You need to plan for your capacity as well. That obviously, once the consulting company leaves, then how are you going to manage these processes? But this cannot be done only with internal capacity. You have to have internal plus external with the right mix.
Yeah, and I can imagine that again, like people are probably sitting out there going, like, I'm not even totally sure where to start. Like, how do I pick that external capacity? How do I pick? And I imagine that's a challenge. You mentioned price, and I suspect strongly that um, the quoted price at the start could could differ dramatically from the actual cost at the end if you don't have the right people lined up and the right internal capacity, the right external. And so how can a CFO say, okay, how do I select the right vendor, and how do I do this right, and not get sort of fooled maybe by early price, but yeah, what is our likely best outcome at the end? How do they what should the steps should they be going through to kind of vet those potential vendors?
Yeah, so even for this process, even for this insight, there are companies that can help them, how to structure this, how to align their internal capacity. Somebody can analyze your internal capacity, skill set, and how to do that, right? I'll give you a story, I guess. I mean, that's probably going to be, very meaningful for the audience as well. So, I mean, most people, there's always a little tension between the software vendors and the customers. I'm pretty sure, Blaine, you have
Mhm.
seen this as well, right? Vendors are always saying the customer is a problem, customer is saying vendors is a problem. I mean, you're always going to have the drama. But in this particular case, and this is nobody's fault, I don't like to throw anybody's under the bus, but this is a real situational problem that most people are going to experience in their software journey. So in this particular case, they are working with a software vendor, great vendor, one of the most reputable, I guess, in the industry. Okay,
Mhm.
they did everything. I mean, they are doing value engineering, they are doing, value analysis, whatever. 5-year TCO, great. It's going to be wonderful, whatever. Okay, a selection company is involved, they are doing their job. Everybody has done everything right. Okay, um,
Yeah.
they go through the implementation process, they go live. As soon as they go live, they get a bill for, can you guess, $200,000. Can you believe this? $200,000 surprise bill. Okay.
Mm.
Now the CFO is panicking. I
Yeah.
didn't plan for 200,000. Where do I find this money?
Yeah.
I mean, at least if you are going to give me a bill, at least tell me 2 months before that you are going to get this
Yeah.
bill. Now I don't know how to find this. So now we are doing the troubleshooting in terms of how they found this bill. Okay. Now, one of the things that they
Mhm.
had not done is they had not analyzed their transactions and how those transactions would impact some of the consumption centric constraints that were there as part of the contract. Okay.
Mm.
Now, vendor said, you never provided this information to me. And the customer is saying, hey,
Yeah.
buddy, I gave you everything. So,
Right.
look, these are the kind of cases where you are going to have a lot of blind spots in general, especially with cloud systems. It's very different. With on-prem, it was easier because the only thing you are buying is code. Okay, now you are buying a
Mhm.
lot more, so you have a lot more responsibilities to take and you don't have as much control. Okay,
Mhm.
every single day, in 2024, every single vendor out there, depending upon how many. And sometimes people say that, I'm simply buying an ERP, but with ERP, you are actually buying 5 legal contracts. And they all are trying to compete with each other. They are trying to align their pricing with each other, right? So you have a lot of,
Mhm.
conflict there. And those forces are going to have impact on your final pricing. So I don't know. I mean, this is just a situational example, for you. But overall, the question was, how do you plan this? I think you need a lot of expertise. You need very deep
Mhm.
architectural expertise in terms of how these systems are going to play together, how the processes are going to play together, how your people are going to play together. And if you cannot forecast the interaction of these forces, you are going to see a lot of surprise bills. Simple as that.
Yeah. Yeah, and I can imagine how shocking that would be, and also that there's, like you said, there's blind spots, and it's there's basically probably processes you can go through to go, okay, let's try and uncover as many unknown unknowns that we possibly can beforehand and midstream and all the way through to make sure that you're, hopefully filling those gaps beforehand, right?
Exactly. I mean, there is no other way. I mean, if you ask, and I read a lot of different books on wars, how they plan, the most unknowns you are probably going to have there. Because let's say if you are sort of fighting in a new territory, How do you guess? How do you find out, where your enemy is going to attack from? And one of the advice, and this is coming from, I don't know whether you have read this book called Wisdom of Bullfrog.
Yeah.
And he talks about when you have uncertainty, the only thing you can do is load, load, and load. Okay, meaning you cannot guess what is going to happen. So the only thing you can do is you have to reserve your inventory, you have to reserve your resources, you have to allocate more time for the planning upfront. And that is what is the importance of phase zero that I was talking about. That most people underestimate the importance of that. They don't commit enough
Mm.
time to be able to do the due diligence, to be able to find these blind spots. And sometimes it might feel that this whole process is probably unnecessary. Okay, and sometimes you might
Mhm.
get lucky, but when you don't get lucky, that's going to be a big shock. It's going to be a nightmare, and that could be
That's when it gets
catastrophic
real.
for the business.
Yeah, that's when it really hits, and that's really wise advice is basically reserve time, resources, everything for the inevitable like unknown unknowns that are going to come your way. So Sam, this has been really useful. Really great information. I'm sure there's some CFO out there that's listening, going, "Okay, this is just taking notes, and this is really going to help me." But if someone wants to come and talk with you and learn about what you guys do, first of all, give me a quick brief of who you are, what you guys do, and then tell me how people should get hold of you.
Yeah, so Sam Gupta, very easy to find. Elevate IQ is the company name that we have. It's Elevate without an E at the end and IQ. If you Google, my LinkedIn profile is probably going to be the first link. Super popular, super approachable on LinkedIn as well. So anybody can reach out to me. Overall, from the Elevate IQ perspective, our focus is in taking this approach in more of the vendor agnostic manner. So number one, we are not affiliated with any vendor. We are very, 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 very few companies in the market that are truly independent. Some people say that they are independent, but they have alignment with four different vendors. So in our case, we are truly independent, truly agnostic, and we are not just agnostic from the ERP perspective, I guess. I mean, we take this approach, from the solution perspective. So whatever you are trying to
Mhm.
do from the enterprise architecture perspective, any categories, we don't care. We take very agnostic approach from the business, transformation. So you are going to look at the business strategy and then the processes and then the data, building the enterprise architecture, managing the whole process, end to end, really handling the business side of things, which is going to be business implementation, I guess, of these systems. That's what we do. I don't know, did I cover all of the points that you had? Um,
Yeah, yeah, no, absolutely. That helps a lot. And so if you're out there and you're thinking of implementing an ERP, go talk with Sam. And it's a good starting point to say, let's do this right so that you don't get that $200,000 bill kind of dropping in your inbox. And also I'd like to say that if you are if you're a CFO, you got your finance team out there, or even if you're a fractional CFO helping numerous businesses, if you're in a spreadsheet working with cash flow, and especially when it's complex, multi-entity, anything like that, come and talk with us at Dry Run. We can likely save you hours every week, give you something that the management team is going to understand at a glance, and get everybody on pace so that you can take care of that always critical cash flow. And you can find us at dryrun.com. Thanks again, Sam. I really appreciate the time. This was a great conversation.
yeah, thank you so much for your time, Blaine, and really appreciated the show. Thank you so much.